Hi guys, this is Mr. Clean, and today I'm going to show you how to make a graph in Google Sheets. Now this video is applicable to any data set that you have. It's a great tool to use, as throughout the year we'll learn how to do more and more complicated things with Google Sheets, but today we're just going to work on making a graph. The data we're going to use is the data from the Apex toilet paper investigation, although this is applicable to any of the labs you do throughout the year, or for my chemistry class, it can be used for you guys too if you follow these basic steps. So the very first thing you have to do is make sure you're in a Google Sheets file. Even if your data is in a Google Docs file, you can't make the sheet with the same abilities and functionality if you're not in Google Sheets. So Google Sheets, you can Google it in Google Sheets. You might have it already linked in the common apps you use. It's easy to get there, but basically the idea is you need to be in that program. So the first thing you're going to do is select your data. It's going to help to have your independent variable. In this activity, it was different brands of toilet paper. I know each group had a different investigation, but this is one of the most common ones, so I'm using this one first. And then in the other column, you want the dependent variable. Make sure there are no labels. It's just numbers, just quantities in your dependent variable column, and if applicable, in your independent variable column too. So there we go. We want just numbers. The spreadsheet can do some awesome stuff, make the graphs for you, do the hard part for you. But if you have words and numbers in the same boxes, it's hard for the program to basically comprehend what's going on. Oops. So you want to have your independent on the left side, the thing that you manipulated, and then your dependent variable in the right column. Once you've got that, you can select all your data, so including the labels. Yeah, you can just take all that data. And then you're going to go up here to insert and then add a chart. And it pretty much makes a chart for you pretty quickly. Sometimes it looks weird, like one's missing, or your scale's off, or the labels don't work. As long as you put the independent on the left and the dependent on the right, you should be okay. There's a couple boxes that you might want to check or uncheck. You want to use, you don't want to use column C as labels. That's part of your data. You want to use, you see right here, row 4 as headers though, and that will kind of fill in some of the work for you. The first thing you got to do is choose, do you want, what kind of chart you want, what kind of graph. And if you review the different types of graph we've talked about, usually when you are comparing a group or a category to something measured, you want to use a bar chart. So if you click out of the chart accent, you need to go back to it. You click these three little dots, edit chart, and there you are. So we're going to use a column chart. It already looks pretty kind of good. It has our tails. Remember tails: title, axes, interval, label, and scale. It already has most of that, but in case it doesn't, or if we need to change something, we can go over here to Customize. That's the second tab right next to Data. We go to Customize. There was Chart Style, which we already kind of chose, and then Chart Axis and Titles. So we need to have titles, right? That's a T in tail. So our chart title, right under Chart Axis Titles, amount of water versus brands of toilet paper. So as long as it references both variables, it doesn't have to be a versus situation. You could say amount of water, different brands, can hold before breaking. That's kind of the way that we were testing the strength of the toilet paper, right? Oops, sorry about that. And we can also, so our title looks good. We can edit our horizontal axis title, which is horizontals across the bottom. Brands of toilet paper. Remember, we want to label units as well. That's part of making a good graph, but there aren't really any units. The brands are just the brands. So we can go to the vertical axis title and the amount of water. Now, unless you measured out in milliliters or something, most of the groups measured it in drops of water. So you want to have those units there. Series, that's the data that you're using. Legend, to be honest, since we only have one set of data, we weren't comparing a lot of different experiments together, we can actually just remove the legend. In this case, it's not needed. The horizontal axis, everything looks good there. We can do some little edits and changes. The vertical axis, you can change the scale here. So our scale, it automatically put it from 0 to 40, which worked. Sometimes Google Sheets will give you a weird scale based on your data values. You want to use something that's actually going to allow you to see all of your data and it isn't misleading about where the 0 is. Okay, looks pretty good. Yeah. Grid lines, that's just an aesthetic thing. You can make the lines going across or not. But that's it. I think we have a pretty good chart. So when you're done, you can close it, and you want to double check, go back through T.A.I.L.S. So does it have a T for title? Yes, it has a title. Does it have the axes? Oh, it did that for us. Oops. Maybe we can get that. Okay. What else do we need? Intervals. Well, there's no intervals on the horizontal axis because there's no numbers. So as long as they're spaced out, it did that for us. And on the vertical axis, the intervals look good. Everything's labeled that needs to be labeled. And last but not least, the scale has been generated for us, or you could have manually set the scale. So you're good. This is an awesome graph. This is a full credit graph. Has everything you need. You can click Control-C to copy it. Again, that's Control-C, or you can right-click and copy chart. And then you can take it over here and paste it in your analysis section. And if you link to the spreadsheet, then if someone else opens the document, they can actually click on stuff and actually follow it to the data. You don't have to do that, but it is convenient when you're sharing the document. So we've got our analysis, and then your data, and your little qualitative statement, and hey, look, your results look awesome. Now, if you're one of the groups that did things a little differently, there was a few of you who just tested one brand, and you had your independent variable was, let's say, the number of drops, and then you measured how many pennies it could hold. So it's going to be very similar here. Still two columns, your independent variable, your dependent variable, but in this case, they're both quantitative. They're both number-based data. So in that case, we're still going to select everything. We're going to go to Insert, Chart. But this time, instead, the first thing we're going to do is choose our graph style. This time, since we are using quantitative data on both axes, it's a better fit to use either a scatter plot, or if you would like to kind of help you see the trends a little better, you can use a line chart as well. Again, we don't want to use column B as labels. Actually, we don't want to use column B in this case is here. So column B as labels, row 20 as headers. And there we go. Okay. So you should only have one line here because it wasn't like you have multiple data sets. You're just comparing drops to pennies. You didn't do multiple brands, so you should only have one line. So your chart style is good. Your chart title, maybe you can say how, because the thing you changed is water, so how moisture affects toilet paper's ability to carry weight. Oops, looks like we put that in the wrong area. So you're going to put that under the chart title. And then our axes titles, for the horizontal axis, it's amount of water in drops, and the vertical axis is amount of weight. And our unit here is pennies. Unless you measured the pennies' actual weight, the scale, you just can say the number of pennies. You don't know in grams. Moving down, the series of data, you already know which one. Legend, again, since we're only comparing one brand, We actually don't need a legend if there's only one thing to represent. On the horizontal axis, we have our numbers going across, and on the vertical axis, we have numbers going down. Again, they chose a scale automatically for us from 0 to 100. That's pretty good because it includes all the data. That's kind of what you're looking for. And the grid lines, those come standard, so we're going to leave them the way they are. Okay. Real quick back here, remember you don't want to have it say, you don't want to use column B as the labels. On a quantitative line chart, if you don't use the column B as labels, you want them to actually be numbers, you also need to click aggregate column B, and then you'll get the data that you want to see. Okay, so for a line chart, use row 20 as headers and aggregate your column. It's going to say column B, column C, it matters where on the sheet you made the chart. Okay, and I think that's good. Let's look at it again. We've got our title, we have our axes, and they're labeled with units. We have our intervals already pre-spaced out for us. We have, again, labels. Everything's labeled on the chart. And one thing that you do need to add. Let me go back, edit it. That's the cool thing. You can always edit on the series of data. You want to show your data points. So under series, you can choose the color too. You can customize it, do whatever you like, make it pretty, and you can. Oops. Make the line thicker. That's your cup of tea, but you want to make the points actually show up. So if you choose something like this, you can choose the shape. It will actually show the dots where the data is, which makes it a little bit clearer about the specific data points you collected. And there you go. You've got all the different things you need. Again, you can just go here and click copy chart, and then in your lab, so each one of these reports only needs one. I'm just showing you an example, but you could paste it in, and there you go. There's all. Looks great. Perfect graph. Finally, this is kind of extra. There's probably one or two groups who really need to see this. Whoops. Some of you were ambitious and you did multiple trials. You had trials 1, 2, and 3. Now, again, the reason you do multiple trials is to get an average of your data to help account for any errors, or to get a more regular number to help. Maybe there was some inconsistencies in toilet paper size or tightness, or the size of your water drops. Maybe some dirty pennies had extra mass on them or something. So some of you I did see do multiple trials. So you can record that data just the same in the sheet. But then the reason why you collected this data, you don't want to graph these three separately. You want to, the point of having multiple trials is being able to average that data. So I know most of you can just add it up, 4 plus 2 plus 3 divided by 3 and get the average. But when you have more complicated numbers or bigger data sets, you can actually make the sheet work for you. So if you type in equals and all these different functions that Google Sheets can do, and starts with equals, that's the code to tell it what to do. You type in equals and then the word average followed by parentheses sign, and then you click the numbers you want it to average and close that parentheses sign. Bam, it just did the work for you. There's a lot of shortcuts in Google Sheets and in spreadsheet programs. So what you can also do, once you've made the equation for this one, instead of typing it in over and over and over again, you can click that cell. You don't want the arrow, you don't want the hand, you want the cross. If you have the cross, you can drag it down to multiple boxes and spread that function, that formula to those boxes. Now this looks a little crazy. There's way too many decimal places. It's not really practical for our needs. So we can actually click this up here and we can decrease it. We can just go to the tenths this time. In chemistry, you'd want to match it to the correct number of significant figures. Or in physics, normally you might just use a round number like the tenths or the hundredths based on the size and scope of your data. So now that we've got all that, then we're going to make a graph using the brand and the amount of H2O. So again, insert chart. Oh, this one didn't do everything for us. A little different because it's a bigger data set. When you don't just have two columns, Google Sheets gets a little bit, hey, what are we supposed to do here? So you have to be careful what you click. You still want to use row 23 as your headers. You don't want to use column B as labels. You want to aggregate column B. We're going to use a column chart or bar graph because we are comparing quantitative measurements with just groups or categories. So we are going to stick with the column chart. We go over to customize. Now a lot of stuff's missing, so this kind of really tests that you know what to add first. So we're going to go to our title. Our title was average amount of water, toilet paper can hold before ripping. And writing a concise but descriptive title is an art, so you'll get better at it over time. But make sure it includes both variables and also is descriptive. Okay, so there's our title. We need our horizontal title, which is toilet paper brand. Our vertical axis title is going to be amount of water, and again our units are drops. And we don't need a legend because we only have one data set. Our horizontal axis, everything looks good here. Our vertical axis, we want to make sure we can set our scale. But again, most of the time Google Sheets will choose a pretty good one for you, but gotta always double check. And good lines. You can make them bolder if you want, but there's really no need to, so you can just do whatever's default. And there you go. I think we've got another great chart. So we're going to double check again. Does it have a title? Yes. Does it have axes? Yes. Does it have good intervals? Well, for a bar graph, it's best you're going to get. There's no actual data down here. Our vertical axis looks awesome. Does it have labels? Yes. Does it have a great scale? Where applicable? Yes, it does. Okay. We've got another good graph. Oops. We can, once we've got that one, we can copy it. And I'm going to paste, oops, do the wrong thing. We're going to copy it, and we can paste it in. And there we go, another awesome graph. This is perfectly acceptable, includes everything that needs to be there. There's a lot more tips and tricks to learn in Google Sheets, which we'll pick up throughout the year, but here's the basics to make your graph. If you need to go back or ask questions, make sure to do so, because you are expected to basically have this skill and be able to use it throughout the year now. Alright, you guys, see you in class.